Hi, I'm Renee. This channel is Renée. This channel's a quiet space for people navigating transition, transformations, and the thresholds in between, major changes in life. We all have them from time to time, and I have been helping people for several decades now navigate change, initiate change, um, and follow that path through it. So today I wanted to talk about transition, transformation as a felt sense. Like, what is it that we feel through this experience of transformation? And if I'm looking this way, it's because there's a lot of things that we can talk about related to this. And so I've made myself some notes to keep my thoughts a little organized. And so, first of all, just to set the context, transition's never a single moment in time. It's never that moment that you make a choice to do something. That choice, while we might think of it logically as the instant of the transition, it really, if you go back and look at it, you'll see that transition transformation begins to happen even before that change is made. And at that decision point, really what you've done is you've just opened the door to the transformation a little bit more clearly. You might have had it cracked before then, but you'll notice that you've basically now signaled the universe that you're going to get on this transformation road and you're going to see it through. So it's that um, that point of inflection that we might think of logically. But what I'm trying what I want to cover today is really this felt sense. So we're not really talking about the task list of things that you will do. It's the emotional journey that will happen for you. And it does for all of us. Of course, everybody's journey is different. Based on how you process things emotionally, your journey will be different. But generally, some of these concepts you'll recognize as, oh, that makes sense to me. So when you begin this process of transformation, you're going to find yourself, you'll look like your old self on the outside, but on the inside, you start this identity shift that happens. You'll begin to allow for that new identity to come in. So when that begins to happen, you've got that doorway wide open to change. And the first kind of real, kind of big phase, I'm going to lump these in phases, I think, is what I will call this in-between feeling you'll get, where you're not quite in your old life anymore, but you're not quite in your new life either. You've let go of lots of the old, but you're very unfamiliar with the new, what it's going to look like. So you'll get this feeling of being suspended between two identities. And this is a very disconcerting feeling. You're no longer who you were, but you're no longer certain of exactly who you're becoming. A sense of loss can come in because you may, without even realizing it, begin to grieve some of the old identity that you're shedding away. This time feels very ungrounded. Um, just allow yourself some patience and some grace through this experience, because it is very disconcerting, and it kind of shakes your sense of your own self and security. So you've got to give yourself some grace and allow the grief to flow where it needs to flow, um, and allow the uncertainty to just be, which realize is much easier to say than it is to actually do. Um, I think this is where the slowing down really becomes. I'll talk in a minute about this slowing down period that happens, but I think the slowing down ends up almost being a response that we have, a coping mechanism, if you will, to this feeling of uncertainty when we're in this in between time. Make sense? Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the emotions, the emotions that are going to come up during this process. I know for me, there were waves of excitement, and followed by absolute waves of being petrified and fearful. There were days where I might get up in the morning and be really excited to go to the market, or I had a plan for something and feel really excited about it, and get up in that morning and go, "Oh, I just don't want to leave the house. I just want to stay in the safety of these four walls." And you have to give yourself some grace on those days. Some days you'll have days of just being really clear and kind of understanding exactly where things are, exactly what's going on. You'll feel like you've got such a sense of command over your universe. And then there are days that you wake up and you're like, why did I do this? Like, you'll just have such doubt, because it's almost like there was a day that I woke up about a week in to my move to France, and I remember waking up in the morning, and the very first thought that I had, I don't know why this dropped in, but it did. The thought dropped in that I owned a car in France, and I was not even sure how the registration process worked. Did I have to renew it annually? Blah, 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 blah. Like all of these questions, like, I don't know any of this. What business do I have of owning a car in a place where I don't know how anything works? And I remember just having to take a deep breath and just say to myself, just kind of give myself a little pep talk on, do I know where I could find out those things? Do I know, could I get informed? And how would I go about that? And of course, within probably 15 minutes and a few Google searches over coffee, I had all of the background information that I needed. I was past the fear and was back into that sense of being clear that I was now more educated in how something worked. But now imagine that occurs every day, multiple times a day, through a multitude of things. And I'm a year and a half in at this point. My French is a whole lot better now than it was in the beginning. And at the same time, I had a very frustrating day yesterday. I needed to call my mobile phone company because I can't find a copy of a facture or an invoice. on my account online, and I need a copy of this particular invoice for my company accounting, and I cannot find it. So, and as with lots of companies in France, they do not all have online help. There might be some help, but there's not like chat help where you can do something interactive. There's nothing like that available. And I knew that their options, it wasn't even like you could send an email and ask a question, you have to call. And this is the French really like verbal one-on-one engagement. So I knew I needed a call. And so I had to prep for the call. And I was like fingers crossed that I would get someone who had some English. Usually, if they've got even a little, we can kind of Franglish our way through. Because the phone is very difficult for conversation, sometimes it just comes through as just a bunch of sounds that make no sense. And so I had to work through that. Very frustrating day. After 2 attempts, I've had to set it aside. I don't need it for a few weeks, and I'm giving myself some grace. I'll attempt it again next week. I will prepare differently for the conversation, and I will try again. I have friends who are fluent that I could call upon, but for me, it's really important for me that while I know they're there and available as a last resort, I need to be able to do this on my own. So um, you you have to keep at it. Um, so so those periods of having deep clarity, having doubt, periods of grief without a clear sense of what's being grieved will happen. Some days you might just feel angry or restless or frustrated. I know for me, frustration is like my big alarm bell. Um, in human design, I'm a projector. Frustration means I am off track. And so I use that as my alarm bell that I need to back off. Like yesterday with the mobile phone company, I was entirely frustrated. That became a consuming kind of energy. And so I just stopped, paused, put it away, and moved to something else. And I'll come back around to it when I can bring a better energy to it. Um, so being prepared for this emotional process, tenderness and sensitivity. Some days you're going to be at the grocery store and somebody's going to say something to you that you might not understand, and they might get frustrated. You may sense their frustration and feel very tender about it. So being prepared for those situations, knowing that that's going to happen, not making yourself wrong in those situations, not making the other person wrong either. Um, Give the whole situation as much grace as you possibly can. What I try to do when that happens is find humor in it and just, you know, say to myself, I'm doing the best I can. And that's all I've got is the best I can. And not everybody has to understand that. So, giving yourself some emotional grace, hugely important during transition. I want to go back for a moment and talk about the identity disruption again, this change in identity. Roles that once defined who you are may no longer fit. This, while I expected lots of change in my own transition, um, it was like when I opened that door to change, the universe took that as an open invitation to change anything and everything. And I was a little unprepared for that at the time. Um, Thankfully, I was able to just kind of settle in and let what's coming come. And just again, a lot of grace. Um, I ended up like finding myself questioning my long held ambitions and goals in a way that I didn't expect that I would. I assumed that I would move to France and I would pick up working, and kind of still be my the same self I was before. Um, Although learning a new language and learning cultural changes, what I didn't realize is how much it would change the inner landscape of me. Um, and so, especially in those early weeks, you feel very disconnected to your former life, but you're not connected to your new life. And suddenly you're questioning everything. You just have to allow that questioning to occur and see it as a profound gift, because I truly believe that's what it is. It is your opportunity to kind of clean clean your own inner house, so to speak, and allow the new to come in whatever way it's going to. You'll find yourself uh, asking yourself questions like, who am I without this thing? I had very much always thought of myself as a morning person. And suddenly I was having to adjust to my work days being in the evening. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to be a morning person. How can I possibly be a morning person like I always have been? How is this going to work? And I started to almost feel a little panicked over making the adjustment in how my workday was going to look. And I just stopped worrying about it and allowing each day to be approached by however I felt in that day. And over a few months of kind of settling into a new routine, I am just as much of a morning person as I ever was. And I have this wide, expansive morning that I love having complete and utter control of, because my work is later in the day. So allowing for this identity disruption, I think is really something to think about before committing to a transition, realizing that it's going to change way more about you than you might think, and allowing for that and giving yourself some grace in that process. Really important. I want to talk about this slowing down. I alluded to it earlier in um, that there's so much change and you're in that in between, that sometimes I think the natural coping mechanism that we have as humans is we need to slow down to still feel like we're somewhat in control, perhaps. Slowing down may provide us a sense of safety and security. Um, I definitely found myself with a need to slow down in a way that I've never experienced that kind of a need for slowness before. And thankfully, coming to France, everybody else was already on a much slower pace than the one in the US that I was used to. So I had fantastic examples of slowness everywhere around me, which was wonderful. I had to allow myself to slow down. And I just had a reduced capacity for productivity. I needed more rest. And there were days when I needed more solitude. I didn't want to be out and around everybody. It felt like there were days that I just needed to be able to process with me, myself, and I, having a conversation about what the heck is going on with me, myself, and I, and why am I questioning, everything about myself in a way that I didn't think I would. That required slowness, and that's what showed up. um, I It was difficult to do things like adapt routines and adapt structure. I wanted flexibility. I needed flexibility to give myself as much grace as I could. Um, it's just important. Um, that former hustle energy that I had really does disappear. At the time, I thought, boy, like I'm becoming French here pretty quickly with letting the hustle go. But I don't think the French had as much to do with it as just being in a deep interpersonal transition as much as a deep life transition had to do with it. I just did not have the capacity for hustle. And um, and now, like, I kind of shun any kind of hustle. Today I have a very busy day, and I went and had coffee this morning, and now I'm having coffee with all of you, and I just am refusing to jump on the hustle bandwagon and force my way through getting everything done. I know I have plenty of time ahead of me, and if I show up fully and contentedly, then I will apply focus, and everything that needs to get done will get done. Um, Without me bringing that, have to have to conquer energy to a situation. So allowing for this slowdown energy, um, and sometimes you're going to feel guilty about moving slower. Don't feel guilty about moving slower. Realize the gift that you're giving yourself in the slowdown, because you're allowing yourself to connect with this change that is happening for you interpersonally, and giving your focused attention to yourself. How good is that? It's fantastic. Um, Knowing that the slowdown is just, it's an important part of this experience. So if you can normalize for yourself the slowing down and accept it as a new way of being, uh, it's really a fantastic gift. Um, I think many people, particularly us Americans, because we're raised in a culture of hustle, we are also raised to think that slowing down is being lazy. It's seen as a negative thing. So allowing ourselves to accept this slowness for the gift that it is really important. So just a note to those of American, that American way of being. Allow for the slowness. Really important. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the external and internal mismatch that's happening. You may have other people celebrate your transition while at the same time you're feeling like, was this really the right thing to do? This feels very overwhelming. This, you are very uncertain. You don't know where it's really going, and yet other people are going, well done, you. It feels very discombobulated when that happens. Um, People will assume that you are living the dream. I hear this all the time. You live in France? Oh my gosh, you're living the dream. Uh, yeah, but that dream also wakes up and has reality to it. You know, there's plenty. I could do an entire video on the dream of living in France versus the reality of living in France. Yes, there are wonderful things about living in France, but some of those things from that dream of a life somewhere else are romanticized, over romanticized, almost to the point of being fantasy. You know, after a while, you know, going to the market is just going to the market. Um, you know, I think we tend to romanticize those market days, those French market days, particularly your big provincial markets here can really get romanticized. Um, but when you're living somewhere, it you know, things take on a deeper sense of reality. You still have to get through your day. Um, you know, feeling unseen in the complexity of the experience. Feeling unseen can be a daily occurrence sometimes when you're also learning the language. It's very easy to fade into the background and feel like you're observing everyone else living life. Um, but to be honest with you, when I was in the States, I was very much feeling like I was watching everybody else living their life and I wasn't living the life that I was looking to live. So I had this, I think, a little bit less when I came here, but there are still days, particularly with the language, um, because you'll find yourselves in situations where you want to express yourself fully about something and thoughtfully about something, and you just don't yet have those words and are able to convey it. And French as a language um, it communicates a lot of things through nuance and subtlety, where English is not like that at all. So there's sometimes we have phrases that just don't translate, and you have to find other ways to convey the feeling that you're trying to get across. So there ends up being this kind of mismatch, smiling publicly while you're processing so much internally, privately. Um, that's what I mean when I'm talking about the internal and external mismatch. Yeah. More grace for yourself. I want to talk quickly about trust in this process because you're going to find yourself in multiple occasions needing to let go when you don't know exactly that the next step is visible, but you're going to have to let go of where you're at. You'll have to make decisions when you do not have complete certainty. You won't know if you're doing it entirely right. You've got to learn to move without excuse me, without external validation. You're really going to have to find your own internal validation process to support this transition. Because in many cases, other people cannot validate you. They might be very good at throwing you off track. And so you've really got to be careful in who you end up talking about your difficulties with. You want to make sure that those people are going to be supportive and they don't have their own agenda. Because if they don't see for themselves how they would make this kind of a change, they will question your sanity in doing it. And if you're turning to somebody like that at that moment where you just need to talk to someone, it could actually um, just derail your progress. So being aware of that. Learning to trust yourself through this journey is one of the most important things that you can do. So trusting your inner guidance over logic, and and learning to feel both liberated and terrified at the same time. But trust yourself. Okay, there are so many more things that I had on my list, but I'm going to cut a few of these out. Maybe I'll talk about those separately. Otherwise, this video is going to be way too long, and I feel like it might already be there. Um, so in this part, I want to talk about the things about transition that people don't talk about. That transition is disorienting. It's not glamorous. Um, I mean, a move to France can sound hugely glamorous. I can assure you, it is not. It is a hard fought, hard won process that is still ongoing and will be for years to come. Um, I have an insane amount of grace and appreciation for anyone who moves from their home country to another country. Um, no one would choose that route as the easy road, because it is not. It is one of the hardest things I think that someone can actually do. So, really making sure that you're aware of that, of that reality. It is not glamorous. Um, and you can prepare yourself as much as you can prepare yourself, and you will not be prepared for everything. This process of transformation is a major opportunity for growth, but often growth can feel like loss. And the reality of it is that you don't always feel brave. Sometimes you just feel scared, and that needs to be okay too. There are long stretches that feel like nothing is happening, and then suddenly you'll get a letter or a thing will happen, and then you'll have a bounce of progress. But most often you have to feel comfortable with the waiting, particularly in France. Often when you're becoming this new version of yourself, the becoming is invisible before it's visible. So trusting that becoming is happening, even if you don't know it consciously, is all a part of that journey to trusting yourself. Yeah. Those are some of the big things that probably people don't talk about enough or prepare for enough when they're taking on a major transition. Yeah. Okay, let's close this out. So just a few reflections. Transition requires patience more than action. You're going to require much more patience and then short bursts of action. You are allowed to not have all of the answers yet. I'm going to tell you, there is just no way to have all of the answers up front. There's no way to have all of the answers at any point in time. I don't have all of the answers today. And I'm a year and a half into it, and I am through a good number of things in my first year that had to be taken care of, and I still don't have all of the answers. So there has to be some grace in that. The discomfort is not a sign that you're off track. The discomfort's just a sign that you're growing. Allow yourself to be reformed. I remember one time I was being interviewed by Renée on their Bag Out Bound channel, and she asked me what advice I would have for other people, and I said that I would advise people to allow France to change them, because if they allow it, it will. And I stand by that today. I thankfully, unconsciously at the time, I was open to allowing France to change me. And it has. And it has in way more ways than I could have ever predicted. And I love it. Yeah. One day you'll look back on this transformation and you will see all of the coherence in it, all of the alignments, all of the ways that you were supported along the way. And you'll probably remember a lot of things that will make you laugh. So if you feel like you are in between worlds right now, you're not alone. You're just in transition. Sorry to say, you're just in transition. So if you are in a season of transition and this video resonated, I hope that you will like and subscribe and hang around. I invite you to participate in this community that I am trying to build, supporting people through change and transformation. Have a great day. A bientôt.